The bailiff calls the courtroom to order as Marcus Bennett sits at the defense table in an ill-fitting borrowed suit. 3 white police officers sit in the front row, smirking. The prosecutor holds up a plastic evidence bag containing drugs Marcus has never seen before. His public defender barely looks at him. The judge's gavel crashes down. Marcus' hands tremble. Not from fear, but from rage he must contain. In his jacket pocket, his fingers brush against a leather badge holder he cannot yet reveal. Not yet. The trap must close completely first. Prosecutor Richard Davenport stands and addresses the all-white jury with a confidence that makes Marcus' stomach turn. Davenport paints Marcus as a dangerous drug dealer from the bad part of town, his voice dripping with implications that need no explicit statement. He emphasizes Marcus' neighborhood, the Riverside area, using coded language about those people and that element. Words that carry generations of prejudice, wrapped in legal respectability. Marcus recognizes Davenport's rhetoric because he has heard it 100 times during his 6 months of investigation. The same script used to incarcerate dozens of innocent black men. The first witness is called, and Officer Derek Holloway strides to the stand with the swagger of a man who has done this many times before. Holloway is a 15-year veteran with a crew cut and the kind of confidence that comes from never being questioned. He places his hand on the Bible and swears to tell the truth. And Marcus almost laughs at the irony. Holloway begins his testimony by claiming he was on routine patrol in the Riverside neighborhood when he noticed Marcus' vehicle driving suspiciously. The word suspicious hangs in the air, undefined, applicable to anything. A blank check for prejudice. Holloway provides elaborate details about how Marcus was swerving, how he looked nervous, how he kept checking his rearview mirror as though guilt was written across his face. Marcus watches carefully, noting how Holloway makes deliberate eye contact with the other 2 officers sitting in the gallery, a coordinated performance they have clearly rehearsed. Holloway claims he pulled Marcus over for a broken taillight, asked for license and registration. Standard procedure, he says. Then comes the fabrication, delivered smoothly. Holloway testifies that Marcus became aggressive and belligerent, using threatening language, his voice rising in a way that made Holloway fear for his safety. Marcus' jaw tightens because he knows this is the exact script the FBI predicted they would use. When Holloway describes asking Marcus to step out of the vehicle, he adds that Marcus made a sudden movement toward his waistband, the universal police justification for escalation. Holloway says he feared for his safety, ordered Marcus to the ground, called for backup, his hand hovering near his weapon the entire time. During the search, Holloway testifies with absolute certainty. He found a large bag of cocaine under the driver's seat, approximately 200 grams, enough to indicate intent to distribute rather than personal use. Marcus' public defender, Timothy Wells, is a weary man in his 50s who looks like he stopped believing in justice years ago. Wells's cross-examination is pathetically weak, asking only surface questions about the time of day, whether it was cloudy or sunny, what radio channel Holloway was monitoring, basic procedural questions that do nothing to challenge the narrative. Holloway remains calm throughout, his story consistent because it has been rehearsed, polished, repeated in case after case. The prosecutor shows body camera footage that Marcus immediately recognizes has been edited. The video shows Marcus being pulled over, shows him appearing agitated, but the audio is conveniently muted at key moments. The timestamps subtly altered in ways only a trained investigator would notice. Marcus watches the footage and can see exactly where they made the cuts, where they removed his calm compliance and replaced it with carefully selected moments that support their lies. The jury watches with rapt attention, believing every frame, several members looking at Marcus with undisguised disgust and fear. Judge Patricia Caldwell, a middle-aged white woman with steel-gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, maintains what appears to be a neutral expression, but her questions favor the prosecution, her tone warmer when addressing Davenport than Wells. Marcus feels the instinct to stand up, to shout the truth, to pull out his FBI credentials and end this charade. But his training holds him back. He remembers the briefing 6 months ago in a secure FBI conference room, Special Agent Linda Torres laying out the operation with maps and photographs covering the walls. Torres had been clear about what would happen, warning Marcus that he would be arrested, that evidence would be planted, that he would have to endure false accusations. She had looked him directly in the eye and said, "You have to let them think they have won. Let them lie under oath, commit perjury in open court. That is when we have them. That is when the charges stick." Marcus had grown up in Riverside, knew the streets, knew the families, joined the police force at 22 with idealistic dreams of protecting his community. By 28, he had seen enough corruption to make him physically sick, and when the FBI offered him a chance to transfer and go undercover to investigate the very precinct he had once worked in, he had not hesitated. This was personal. This was about cleaning up his hometown, about stopping the officers who were terrorizing the people he had grown up with. Holloway continues his testimony, and then he says the exact words Marcus has been waiting for, the phrase that confirms everything. Holloway testifies that when he pulled Marcus from the car, Marcus said, "You will never take me alive, pig." The exact dialogue the FBI had predicted was their planted phrase, the specific wording they used in case after case. Marcus' pulse quickens because this confirms the pattern, validates 6 months of dangerous undercover work. The second officer, Brian Mitchell, is called to the stand, and Marcus knows the lies are about to get deeper, more dangerous, more difficult to endure without breaking his cover. Officer Brian Mitchell takes the stand, looking younger and less comfortable than Holloway, a man in his late 20s with nervous energy and less experience at lying under oath. Mitchell corroborates Holloway's story, confirming he arrived as backup within 3 minutes of the call, his patrol car screeching to a stop just as the situation was escalating. His version adds new details, layers of fabrication designed to make Marcus appear more dangerous, more guilty, more deserving of the maximum punishment. Mitchell claims that when he arrived, Marcus was resisting arrest, fighting against Holloway's attempts to handcuff him, trying desperately to get back into his car as though there was something inside he did not want them to find. Then Mitchell adds the critical element that makes Marcus' blood run cold. He testifies that he saw Marcus reach into the glove compartment and pull out a black handgun, a 9mm pistol that glinted in the afternoon sunlight. The courtroom reacts immediately with gasps from the gallery, jury members leaning forward in their seats, the prosecutor allowing himself a small, satisfied smile. Marcus' shock is genuine because this was not in the FBI's prediction. This is a new level of fabrication that escalates the charges from simple possession to armed threat against law enforcement officers. Mitchell describes the scene with theatrical detail, saying he drew his own weapon, ordered Marcus to drop the gun, that Marcus briefly pointed it in their direction, finger near the trigger, before finally dropping it and surrendering. The prosecutor presents the gun itself as evidence, a black 9mm handgun with the serial number filed off, claiming it was recovered from Marcus' vehicle. Marcus has never seen that gun before in his life, and knows it is clearly a throwaway weapon from their evidence room, planted to justify the use of force and add years to any potential sentence. Defense attorney Wells objects, but his heart is not in it, questioning the chain of custody in a half-hearted way that does nothing to cast real doubt. Judge Caldwell overrules the objection and allows the gun into evidence, and Marcus can see his chances of acquittal vanishing with each passing moment. Mitchell continues his testimony, describing how they feared for their lives, how Marcus fit the description of a known gang member from the area, how everything about his behavior screamed danger. The racial profiling language is barely concealed, phrases like dangerous neighborhood and high crime area and fitting the profile, words that carry the weight of systematic discrimination. Marcus' internal rage builds like pressure in a sealed container. Knowing this is exactly the pattern that has been terrorizing his community for years, knowing that he is experiencing firsthand what dozens of innocent men have suffered. Under cross-examination, Mitchell shows vulnerability, contradicting himself slightly on the timing, saying first that he arrived in 3 minutes, then later saying it was closer to 5, getting flustered when Wells presses him gently. But Wells does not pursue the contradiction with any real vigor, letting the inconsistency slip away like water through open fingers, seeming either unprepared or unwilling to fight hard for his client. The third officer is called next, Detective Carl Ramsey, a man in his late 40s, wearing plain clothes and an expression of complete certainty. Ramsey was not at the scene of the arrest, but testifies that he investigated Marcus' background afterward, digging into his history to build a profile of a career criminal. Ramsey presents what he claims is Marcus' criminal history, showing the jury arrest reports for prior drug possession charges and an assault case from 3 years ago. Marcus' anger reaches a peak because these are complete fabrications, documents that should not exist because his record has always been clean. Ramsey shows the jury official-looking papers, booking photos that appear convincingly real but are entirely manufactured. And Marcus realizes they have created fake database entries, penetrating deeper into the system than the FBI suspected. The technology and resources required to falsify government databases indicates a conspiracy far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone anticipated. The prosecutor uses Ramsey's testimony to build a narrative of Marcus not as a first-time offender but as a career criminal, a predator who has been victimizing the community for years, someone who represents a culture of violence and lawlessness. Davenport's language becomes increasingly inflammatory, talking about predators and threats to decent tax-paying families, and Judge Caldwell allows it without checking his rhetoric, despite its obvious racial implications. Marcus observes the jury carefully and sees their faces hardening against him, the presumption of innocence eroding under the weight of fabricated evidence and skilled manipulation. One juror stands out, though, an older black woman sitting in position number 7, who seems skeptical, who studies Marcus' face as though trying to read the truth beneath the accusations. Marcus makes brief eye contact with her, trying to convey his innocence without words, hoping she can see something the others cannot. The afternoon break is called, and Marcus is led to a holding cell beneath the courthouse, a small concrete room with a metal bench and the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask decades of despair. In the next cell, a young black man recognizes the officers' names when Marcus mentions them quietly, says they did the same thing to his brother 2 years ago, planted drugs and lied in court and sent an innocent man to prison for a decade. Marcus listens to the story and realizes this is not an isolated pattern but a systematic operation that has been manufacturing cases for years, destroying lives with impunity. The scope of the conspiracy expands in his mind, and he understands that the FBI's investigation may have been too narrow, focused on a few officers when the rot goes much deeper. Then Detective Ramsey appears in the corridor outside the holding cells, walking slowly until he stands directly in front of Marcus' cell. Ramsey leans close to the bars, close enough that Marcus can smell his coffee breath, and whispers, with absolute confidence, "We know who you really are, Bennett. We know you are FBI. It does not matter. No one will believe you. Your badge means nothing down here." Marcus' shock must show on his face because Ramsey smiles, a cold expression without humor. The detective explains that they have known about Marcus' real identity for weeks, that they have people inside the bureau who tipped them off, that they are proceeding with the trial anyway because they know Marcus cannot prove who he is, cannot break cover without destroying the entire investigation. Ramsey says they are calling his bluff, daring him to reveal himself prematurely and watch the case collapse without enough evidence to prosecute anyone. Marcus returns to the courtroom with his hand moving unconsciously toward his jacket pocket where his FBI badge rests in its leather holder, but he sees Ramsey watching him from the gallery, smiling, silently daring him to try. Trial resumes after the break, and Judge Caldwell asks if the defense wishes to call any witnesses to refute the prosecution's case, to present an alternative narrative, to give the jury any reason to doubt. Timothy Wells stands slowly, looking like a man carrying an enormous weight, and says in a tired voice that the defense rests without calling anyone, not even Marcus himself, to tell his side of the story. Marcus immediately protests, leaning toward Wells and whispering urgently that he wants to testify, that he needs to present his version of events, that staying silent is tantamount to admitting guilt. Wells dismisses him with a wave of his hand, whispering back that Marcus speaking will only make things worse, that his attitude will alienate the jury, that people like him do not come across well on the stand. The racial assumption underlying Wells' words is clear, the prejudice that Marcus could not possibly articulate himself well enough to convince a jury that his mere presence and manner of speaking would confirm their worst stereotypes. Marcus' frustration boils over, but he knows that causing a scene will only hurt his case further, and he sits back in his chair feeling betrayed by the very system that is supposed to defend him. During the lunch recess, Wells pulls Marcus into a small private conference room with scratched furniture and fluorescent lights that flicker intermittently. Wells reveals that he has brokered a plea deal with Prosecutor Davenport, 15 years in prison, instead of the potential life sentence Marcus faces if convicted on all charges. Marcus refuses immediately, stating flatly that he will not plead guilty to crimes he did not commit, that he is innocent, that Wells needs to mount a vigorous defense instead of negotiating surrender. Wells argues that the evidence is overwhelming, that 3 police officers testifying under oath, plus physical evidence, guarantees conviction, that fighting is futile and will only result in a harsher sentence. Wells uses fear tactics, describing in graphic detail the conditions Marcus will face in maximum security prison. The violence, the isolation, the years stretching endlessly ahead, saying that 15 years is practically a gift under the circumstances. Marcus studies Wells more carefully, noticing that the attorney is sweating despite the cool temperature, that his hands shake slightly, that something more is happening beneath the surface. Wells finally admits, reluctantly, that he has known Holloway and the other officers for years, that they were friends in college, that they maintain a social relationship. The conflict of interest is staggering. Wells should have recused himself from the case immediately, but instead, he has been throwing the trial from the beginning, making weak objections, conducting feeble cross-examinations, essentially serving as a second prosecutor. Marcus demands a new attorney, threatens to report Wells to the Bar Association for ethics violations, but Wells counters that it is too late, that making a scene now will only hurt Marcus' case further, that judges hate drama and delays, that Judge Caldwell might impose a harsher sentence out of spite if Marcus causes problems. Marcus realizes with sickening certainty that Wells is right in one sense. Creating chaos at this stage could backfire, but waiting might mean conviction and decades in prison for crimes he did not commit. They return to the courtroom and Prosecutor Davenport begins his closing arguments with theatrical passion, pacing before the jury box like an actor on stage. Davenport's performance is masterful in its manipulation, painting Marcus as everything wrong with modern society, a young man who chose violence and drugs over education and work, a threat to innocent tax-paying families trying to raise children in safe neighborhoods. The racial dog whistles are constant, talking about taxpayers versus takers, law-abiding citizens versus thugs, never explicitly mentioning race but making the implications crystal clear to everyone in the room. Davenport hammers on the gun charge particularly hard, saying that Marcus was not just selling poison to his community, but was ready and willing to murder police officers who were simply doing their jobs protecting the public. He shows a blown-up photograph of Marcus' mugshot from the arrest, deliberately chosen to make him look angry and threatening, projecting it on a screen where it looms over the courtroom. Marcus watches the jury absorb this narrative, sees the sympathy and uncertainty drain from their faces, replaced by fear and certainty of his guilt. Wells's closing argument is lackluster and brief, barely 15 minutes long, suggesting weakly that perhaps the officers made honest mistakes in their recollection, that memory is fallible, that reasonable doubt exists, but he never calls them liars, never challenges the fundamental fabrication at the heart of their testimony. Wells sounds like he is reading from a script, making no eye contact with the jury, showing none of the passion that might persuade them to question the prosecution's case. Judge Caldwell instructs the jury with language that is technically neutral but emphasizes the credibility that must be given to law enforcement testimony, the presumption that police officers tell the truth because their jobs depend on public trust. The jury is sent to deliberate in the late afternoon, and Judge Caldwell says they will return the next day if no verdict is reached tonight. Marcus is taken back to the holding cell where he paces like a caged animal, mind racing through his limited options. FBI protocol says he should contact his handler, but his phone was confiscated at arrest, and he has no way to reach Agent Torres without revealing himself. The dilemma tears at him because if he reveals his true identity now, Before conviction, do they have enough evidence to prosecute the officers for conspiracy and perjury? Or will the case collapse with the corrupt officers walking free to frame more innocent victims? Agent Taurus' instructions echo in his memory. Let them convict you. Let that jury say the word guilty. The moment they do, we have them for conspiracy, for false testimony, for civil rights violations under color of law. They have to believe they have won completely before we spring the trap. Marcus' doubt grows because he wonders if the FBI has fully considered what happens if something goes wrong, if the trap fails, if he actually goes to prison and gets lost in the system. That evening, Detective Ramsey appears at his cell again, this time accompanied by Officer Holloway, both men standing outside the bars with expressions of smug satisfaction. They taunt him openly now, confident in their impending victory. Ramsey saying Marcus should have taken the plea deal, that now he is looking at 25 years to life, asking how it feels to be Agent Bennett, federal investigator, about to become inmate Bennett, convicted felon. Holloway adds that Marcus' FBI friends are not coming to save him, that they have been doing this for years, that Marcus is not the first person who tried to take them down and failed. The revelation chills Marcus to his core as they admit to framing others, destroying careers, ruining lives, specifically targeting black men in the community because they are easy victims that juries readily believe are guilty. Holloway brags about how many cases they have manufactured, how much money they have made selling drugs seized from evidence, how the system protects them because no one wants to believe that police officers lie. Marcus records every word mentally, wishing desperately that he had a wire, that this confession was being captured by FBI surveillance. Ramsey adds a final threat, saying that even if Marcus tells the court who he really is, even if he pulls out some badge, no one will believe him. They will think it is a fake, that a black man claiming to be FBI and producing credentials will just result in additional charges for impersonating a federal officer. Their confidence is absolute because they have thought through every angle, considered every possibility, believe themselves untouchable by any law or justice. Then Marcus sees something that makes his stomach drop. Timothy Wells appears at the end of the hallway, clearly sees Ramsey and Holloway at Marcus' cell, but instead of intervening or questioning why police officers are harassing his client, Wells simply nods at them in acknowledgement and walks away in the other direction. Marcus realizes in that moment that Wells is not just conflicted or incompetent, he is fully complicit, possibly on their payroll, the corruption spreading through every level of his defense. The bailiff announces that the jury has reached a verdict after only 2 hours of deliberation, an incredibly short time that Marcus knows means conviction, and his hand trembles as he is led back to the courtroom for what may be the last moments of his freedom. The courtroom is packed beyond capacity, with news cameras outside and community members filling every available seat, the gallery split between those who believe the police narrative and those who have suffered similar injustice and know the truth. Marcus' family is present. His mother, Diane Bennett, sitting in the front row, an elderly woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, clutching a rosary in her weathered hands and praying silently. His younger sister, Keisha, in her mid-20s with her brother's same determined eyes, sits beside their mother with tears already streaming down her face, holding Diane's hand tightly. The jury files into the courtroom and Marcus searches their faces for any sign of hope, but none of them make eye contact with him, the standard signal that they have found him guilty. Judge Caldwell asks in a formal voice if the jury has reached a verdict, and the jury foreman stands, a white man in his 60s who looks like a retired accountant, holding the verdict form in hands that shake slightly. The foreman reads in a clear voice that carries through the silent courtroom. We find the defendant, Marcus Bennett, guilty on all counts. Count 1, possession with intent to distribute. Count 2, resisting arrest. Count 3, assault on a police officer with a deadly weapon. The courtroom erupts in noise, Marcus' mother crying out in anguish, Keisha sobbing loudly, supporters in the gallery gasping and shouting their disbelief and anger. The 3 police officers celebrate openly, Holloway and Mitchell shaking hands, Ramsey patting them on their backs with broad smiles. Marcus remains perfectly still, face impassive, jaw clenched so hard his teeth ache, hands flat on the defense table to keep them from shaking. Judge Caldwell pounds her gavel repeatedly, demanding order, threatening to clear the courtroom if people cannot control themselves. This is the moment Marcus has been waiting for, the point of maximum exposure that Agent Torres said to wait for, when the conspiracy has fully committed itself with perjury and false conviction. His hand moves toward his jacket pocket, fingers closing around the leather badge holder, preparing to reveal his true identity and trigger the FBI operation. Judge Caldwell begins speaking, saying, "Mr. Bennett, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of serious crimes that threaten the safety and well-being of our community." Marcus starts to stand, starts to pull the badge from his pocket, but Judge Caldwell cuts him off sharply, saying, "However, I am not finished." Bailiff restrain the defendant. Two bailiffs rush forward before Marcus can fully stand, grabbing his arms and forcing him back into his seat, preventing him from revealing the FBI credentials. Judge Caldwell makes a shocking announcement, saying that given the severity of these crimes and the clear danger Marcus poses to the community, she is exercising her authority to proceed directly to sentencing rather than waiting the standard 30-day period. Defense attorney Wells does not object, sitting silently as though this is completely normal procedure. Marcus struggles against the bailiff's grip, shouting, "Your Honor, I need to present evidence. I have something to show the court. This is critical information." Judge Caldwell ignores him completely, saying, "You have had your opportunity to present a defense. Your attorney chose not to call any witnesses. That was your choice." Prosecutor Davenport stands and recommends the maximum sentence, calling Marcus an ongoing threat to law enforcement and the community at large. People in the gallery begin shouting, "Let him speak, and this is wrong, an innocent man." But Judge Caldwell points threateningly at the crowd and bailiffs move toward them. Marcus' desperation breaks through his training and he shouts, "I am a federal agent. I am FBI. This entire case is a setup. These officers are under investigation." The courtroom freezes. Everyone stops moving. All eyes turn to Marcus, with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Officer Holloway laughs loudly, a mocking sound that echoes through the silent room, saying, "Here we go. The last desperate lie of a guilty man." Judge Caldwell's reaction is swift and harsh, saying, "Mr. Bennett, attempting to impersonate a federal officer will only add years to your sentence. I will not tolerate such ridiculous claims in my courtroom." Marcus pulls free from one bailiff's grip long enough to get the badge holder out of his pocket, holding it up high, flipping it open to reveal the gold shield, with Federal Bureau of Investigation clearly visible, along with his photograph and identification number. The courtroom descends into chaos with people standing to see better, craning their necks, cameras flashing as reporters capture the moment. Detective Ramsey jumps to his feet, shouting, "It is fake. It is a prop. We found it in his car. He probably bought it online. You can purchase anything these days." Judge Caldwell makes her decision immediately, ordering the bailiff to confiscate that item as evidence, saying she will not allow her courtroom to become a circus. The bailiff takes the badge from Marcus' hand despite his protests, and Marcus shouts his badge number, 74298. His handler's name, Special Agent Linda Torres, stationed at the federal building downtown. Marcus pleads desperately, "Call the FBI field office. Ask for Special Agent Torres. She will confirm everything. She will verify my identity." Judge Caldwell refuses, saying, "I am not interrupting these proceedings based on a defendant's wild claims. This is clearly a stalling tactic and I will not indulge it." Wells finally speaks up, suggesting weakly that perhaps they should verify Marcus' claims before proceeding. But Judge Caldwell snaps at him, saying, "You should have vetted your client's defenses before trial, counselor. It is too late now." Judge Caldwell pronounces sentence, saying, "Marcus Bennett, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in state prison to be served without possibility of parole." And the gavel crashes down with finality. Marcus' family screams. His mother collapses in her seat. Keisha rushes to support her while crying hysterically. Marcus is dragged away by bailiffs, shouting over his shoulder, "Torres, Agent Linda Torres. FBI, call them please, somebody call them." The officers look satisfied. Holloway and Ramsey exit quickly before anyone can question them further. In the holding cell beneath the courthouse, Marcus demands his phone call, demands to contact the FBI, but the bailiff tells him he will get his phone call when he is processed into state custody, which could be a few days depending on transport availability. Marcus realizes they are going to fast-track him into the prison system, bury him in bureaucracy before the FBI can extract him or verify his identity. Other inmates in the holding area, young black men who have been through similar experiences, recognize the officers' names when Marcus mentions them, sharing their own horror stories of planted evidence and false testimony. A pattern emerges from their stories. Over the past 5 years, dozens of young black men from the Riverside neighborhood have been convicted on similar charges, always with the same officers testifying, always with the same prosecutor, always with defense attorneys who barely fought. Marcus feels crushing guilt because he realizes his undercover operation took 6 months to develop, and during that time, dozens more victims were created while he gathered evidence. Late that evening, a transport van arrives to take Marcus to state prison, and he makes one last attempt, telling the transport officers about his FBI status, begging them to make a single phone call to verify. Their response is weary indifference, saying they have heard every story imaginable from convicted criminals, that everyone claims to be innocent, that last week someone claimed to be CIA. Marcus is shackled at the wrists and ankles for the 3-hour transport to Westfield Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in the northern part of the state. As Marcus is being loaded into the van in the courthouse parking garage, he sees something that makes his blood run cold. Judge Patricia Caldwell, walking to her car in a dark corner of the garage, and sitting in the passenger seat waiting for her, is Detective Carl Ramsey. The judge gets into her car with Ramsey as naturally as if they do this regularly, and Marcus understands the full depth of the corruption. The judge is part of the conspiracy. That is why she rushed the sentencing, prevented any verification of his credentials, shut down every attempt he made to reveal the truth. The van doors close and Marcus sits in darkness, surrounded by other convicted men whose stories are probably similar to his FBI badge sitting in an evidence locker somewhere, no one in the system believing who he really is, heading toward 25 years in a prison cell for crimes he did not commit. Prison arrival happens at 3 in the morning. Westfield Correctional Facility looming against the dark sky like a monument to despair, imposing concrete walls topped with razor wire and floodlights that turn night into artificial day. Intake processing is dehumanizing and thorough. Strip search in a cold room, delousing shower with harsh chemicals, fingerprints taken again despite already being in the system, mugshots from multiple angles. Marcus makes repeated requests to the processing officers, asking them to contact the FBI, to call Agent Torres, to verify his identity before it is too late. The officers' reactions range from dismissive to annoyed, telling him that everyone claims to be innocent, that they hear wild stories every single day, that last week someone claimed to be Secret Service. One officer laughs openly, saying they had a guy claiming to be CIA the week before that, asking Marcus if he watches too much television. Marcus' personal belongings are sealed in a plastic bag, everything taken, including his clothing, his watch, even a simple wedding ring that is part of his cover story. Though he is not actually married, he is issued a prison uniform, an orange jumpsuit with numbers stenciled on the back, dehumanizing him into a number rather than a name. Medical screening is cursory and rushed. A tired nurse asking standard questions about mental health and medical conditions, and when Marcus insists he needs to make an urgent call to federal authorities, she makes a note in his file that will haunt him, writing delusional. Claims to be FBI agent. Possible mental health evaluation needed. Housing assignment comes next, and Marcus is told he is going to D-block. General population, rather than protective custody. General population means maximum exposure to danger, no protection from other inmates. Living among men who have been taught that anyone claiming to be law enforcement is either a liar or a snitch deserving of violence. The walk through prison corridors happens in the dead of night, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of industrial disinfectant failing to mask decades of human misery. Other inmates stare through cell bars as Marcus passes, some calling out to assess the new arrival, their voices echoing off concrete walls. D-block is massive, 4 tiers of cells housing over 200 inmates, the noise echoing constantly even in the middle of the night. Cell 23 on the second tier becomes Marcus' new home, and his cellmate is already inside, a man named Dwayne Jackson, a black man in his late 20s with a muscular build and prison tattoos covering his arms. Dwayne introduces himself with cautious assessment, asking the standard question about what Marcus is in for. And Marcus tries to be vague, not wanting to reveal too much too soon. But Dwayne already knows, saying he heard Marcus is the cop killer, the guy who tried to shoot 3 officers, and that will get respect in here. Marcus tries to clarify that he is innocent, that he was framed, but Dwayne cuts him off with a harsh laugh, saying everyone in here is innocent. Everyone has a story. Tell it to someone who cares. Marcus lies awake that first night on a thin mattress over a metal bunk, rough blanket providing little warmth, listening to the sounds of prison life, clanging metal, distant shouts, guards' boots on the metal catwalks. Morning comes brutally early at 5 o'clock. Wake-up call blaring through speakers, and breakfast in the cafeteria reveals the prison's social structure. Different gangs sit in different sections of the room, racial divisions clearly marked, an invisible map of territory and allegiance that new inmates must learn quickly to survive. Marcus gets his tray of watery oatmeal and cold toast and coffee that tastes like dirty water, trying to sit alone and keep a low profile. But he is approached immediately by 3 Street Kings members, including Dwayne, and their leader is a massive man named Big Mike, 6'5" and 300 pounds, with a scar running across his face. Big Mike's message is direct, saying he heard Marcus stood up to cops, which earns respect. But he also heard something else, a rumor that is far more dangerous. Big Mike asks if it is true that Marcus has been telling people he is FBI, and the way he asks makes clear that the wrong answer could be fatal. Marcus tries to explain carefully, saying he really is FBI, that he was working undercover, that the arrest and trial were part of a conspiracy to silence him. Big Mike's laughter is loud and mocking, asking if Marcus is wearing a wire right now, if he is trying to build cases against inmates, if he thinks they are stupid enough to fall for this. Tension escalates quickly as other inmates gather, forming a circle around Marcus, accusations flying. Someone shouts he is a snitch, another voice calls him a fed, a third says he is trying to infiltrate their operations. Marcus understands that in prison culture, being labeled as police or a snitch is effectively a death sentence, that violence will follow as certainly as night follows day. The guards watch from their elevated position but do not intervene, seeming almost amused by Marcus' predicament. Dwayne surprisingly steps in, pulling Marcus away from the confrontation, telling Big Mike to wait for verification before doing anything permanent. Back in their cell, Marcus asks Dwayne why he helped, expecting no answer or a demand for payment. Dwayne's response surprises him, saying he does not know what Marcus really is, but something about the case does not add up, especially when Dwayne heard the names of the officers involved, Holloway and Mitchell. Dwayne reveals that 2 years ago, those same officers arrested his younger brother, planted drugs on him, lied in court with fabricated testimony, and his brother got 15 years. The pattern is identical. Same officers, same testimony, same fake evidence, same public defender who barely mounted a defense. Dwayne has heard similar stories from dozens of men inside Westfield, all victims of the same conspiracy. And while he does not know if Marcus is really FBI, he knows those officers are dirty. Marcus feels a spark of hope that Dwayne might become an ally, someone who understands the system's corruption from personal experience. The prison library visit that afternoon gives Marcus access to legal resources, and the librarian is an elderly white man named Mr. Patterson who has worked at Westfield for 30 years. Marcus asks about procedures to contact the FBI from inside prison, about how to prove his identity and get verification of his credentials. Patterson's advice is legally sound but practically discouraging, saying Marcus can file a motion for new trial, can request that the court verify his claimed FBI status, but warns that such processes take months, if not years, tied up in bureaucratic procedures and judicial backlog. Marcus' urgency grows because he knows he does not have months. The corrupt officers will make sure he does not survive that long, arranging an accident or an attack that will silence him permanently. During afternoon yard time, Marcus approaches different inmates carefully, asking if anyone has connections outside who could contact the FBI on his behalf. But most refuse, not wanting involvement in anything that could bring trouble. One older inmate named Terrell Williams, a man in his 50s who has been incarcerated for 20 years, shows wisdom earned through hard experience. Terrell says he has seen this before. Police officers framing people, manufacturing evidence, destroying families and communities while the system protects them. Terrell offers to help, saying his daughter visits next week and could try to make phone calls for Marcus, could try to reach Agent Torres at the FBI. Marcus gives Terrell all of Torres' contact information, her direct office number, her cell phone, the address of the federal building, anything that might help establish contact. That evening in his cell, Marcus writes letters documenting everything, trying to create a paper trail that might survive even if he does not. The warden's voice comes over the loudspeaker announcing that a new warden will be touring D Block the next morning, standard procedure when leadership changes. The next morning, the warden's entourage moves through D Block, with guards flanking him, and Marcus sees a white man in his early 60s wearing an expensive suit that looks out of place in the grim prison environment. The warden introduces himself to the gathered inmates, saying, "I am Warden Richard Holloway. I am here to ensure discipline and order are maintained at all times." Marcus freezes at the name Holloway, the same surname as Officer Derek Holloway, and he calls out from his cell asking if the warden is related to Derek Holloway. The warden stops walking, turns slowly to look at Marcus, a cold smile spreading across his face. His response confirms Marcus' worst fear, saying, "That is my nephew, a fine officer. Why do you ask?" Marcus realizes this is why he was sent to Westfield specifically rather than any other facility, that the placement was coordinated to keep him under their control. Warden Holloway approaches Marcus' cell, studying him through the bars, saying, "Oh, you are the Bennett case. Derek told me all about you. Told me you might cause trouble with your FBI fantasy." The threat is delivered calmly, saying, "Let me be clear, Bennett. Discipline problems in my prison get handled severely. I would hate to see you have an accident in here." The warden walks away, leaving Marcus understanding he is officially marked, that the conspiracy's reach extends even into the prison administration. That afternoon, Dwayne returns to their cell visibly agitated, and Marcus can tell something serious has happened. Dwayne reveals that Big Mike received a package from outside, contraband that should never have gotten through security, including a cell phone and weapons, shivs made from sharpened metal. Dwayne warns Marcus that the package came from Holloway's people, from the corrupt officers on the outside, that they are arming the gang for a specific purpose. Marcus asks why Dwayne is telling him this, risking his own safety to warn someone he barely knows. Dwayne's answer is grave, saying because the package came with a message, with specific instructions, and Marcus' name was on that message, they are putting a hit on you. Then Dwayne reveals something even worse, saying the message came with photographs, pictures of Marcus' mother and sister, with their home addresses clearly visible, and the instructions make clear that the hit is not just on Marcus but on his family too. If he keeps talking about being FBI, if he keeps trying to expose the conspiracy, Marcus' panic is immediate and overwhelming, pacing the small cell like a trapped animal, knowing that his family is now in immediate danger because of his investigation. He has to find a way to get word out immediately, to warn his mother and sister, to get them into protective custody before Holloway's people can reach them. Morning comes with an unexpected lockdown, the warden announcing over the loudspeaker that cell inspections will be conducted, supposedly looking for contraband. Guards move through D Block searching cells, tossing belongings, but Marcus realizes they are really mapping who is where, preparing for something. When guards search Marcus' cell, they are deliberately rough, throwing his few possessions around, and one guard leans close enough to whisper, "You should have kept your mouth shut. Today is your last day." The lockdown is lifted and inmates are released to the yard for recreation, and Marcus debates whether staying in his cell or going to the yard is safer. He decides the yard offers more witnesses, more people around, might actually be safer than being alone in his cell. The yard has a tense atmosphere. Inmates unusually quiet, everyone sensing that something is about to happen. Terrell approaches Marcus and warns him directly that something is planned for today, telling him to stay near the guard tower where officers can see everything. Marcus positions himself carefully with his back to a wall, near enough to the tower that guards should be able to intervene if violence breaks out. Then Big Mike appears with 15 Street Kings members, and they fan out in a coordinated pattern, surrounding Marcus while other inmates back away, not wanting to be involved in what everyone knows is coming. Marcus sees that the guards who usually watch the yard closely have suddenly disappeared, abandoning their posts at the exact moment when violence is planned. Big Mike approaches holding a shank, a sharpened piece of metal with a taped handle, the kind of weapon that can kill efficiently. The other inmates have backed away completely, creating an empty circle around Marcus, knowing what is about to happen and not wanting to become collateral damage. Big Mike speaks calmly, saying nothing personal, Bennett. Just business. You should not have messed with Holloway and his friends. The attack begins with the Street Kings rushing Marcus from multiple directions, and his FBI training kicks in with defensive tactics and hand-to-hand combat skills. Marcus manages to take down the first two attackers, using their momentum against them. But he is overwhelmed by sheer numbers. 15 armed men against one unarmed target. He gets stabbed in the shoulder, then in the side, feeling the blade slide between his ribs, blood flowing hot and fast down his body. Marcus stumbles, trying to stay upright, knowing that falling means death, but his strength is fading. Other inmates watch from safe distances, some cheering the violence, some looking away, but no one helps. No one intervenes. A sudden explosion on the opposite side of the yard changes everything. A smoke bomb going off with a loud bang, filling that section with thick gray smoke. Guards rush toward the explosion, alarms ringing, chaos spreading through the yard. In the confusion, an older white inmate that Marcus has not noticed before suddenly tackles Big Mike from behind, a man who moves with trained precision despite his age. The stranger fights with expert skill, disarming Big Mike, breaking his arm with a quick, efficient motion that speaks of professional training. The other Street Kings hesitate, confused about who this old man is and why he is intervening. The stranger grabs Marcus, pulling him to his feet, saying, "Come on, move now. We do not have much time." They run through the smoke toward a service entrance that is being held open by Terrell, who is clearly part of this rescue plan. Into the prison interior they go, through the kitchen area, through storage rooms, the older man leading with absolute certainty as though he knows every inch of the facility. They reach an empty classroom wing in the education building, and the man locks the door behind them, immediately tending to Marcus' wounds with a first aid kit that was hidden there in advance. Marcus gasps out the question, "Who are you?" And the old man's introduction is stunning. He says his name is Frank Morrison, and like Marcus, he is FBI, or was before being forcibly retired by this same conspiracy. Marcus' shock is profound as he asks how long Frank has been imprisoned here, and Frank's answer is devastating. 8 years, victimized by the same officers Holloway, Mitchell, and Ramsey, framed in the exact same way. Frank tells his story quickly while treating Marcus' wounds, how he was deep undercover investigating this precinct in 2017, how he got too close to exposing them, how they framed him for murder with planted fingerprints and DNA and fabricated witnesses. His trial was identical to Marcus, rushed, corrupted, with a conviction that came despite his protests about being FBI. Frank tried to expose the conspiracy from inside prison, but the FBI abandoned him, believing he had gone rogue or was mentally unstable, not understanding that the conspiracy had penetrated even into federal law enforcement. Frank spent years in solitary confinement, punished for his attempts to reveal the truth, finally released to general population last year, when the administration thought he had been broken. But Frank has been planning and watching, and he recognized Marcus as FBI the moment he arrived, seeing the signs that only another trained agent would notice. Frank has been building a network of allies inside the prison, including Terrell and a few guards who are loyal to truth rather than corruption. Marcus asks desperately if Frank can help him get word out to the FBI, and Frank's response is discouraging, saying he has been trying for 8 years with no success, that the conspiracy controls communication channels, that the warden and half the guards monitor everything. But Frank reveals he has been working on an escape route, a plan that took years to develop, mapping security patterns and guard rotations and vulnerabilities in the facility. Frank admits he could have escaped alone months ago but waited, hoping to help other victims, and Marcus' arrival accelerated his timeline, gave him renewed purpose. Marcus' wounds are serious, but not immediately life-threatening, though he needs proper medical attention soon. Frank's solution is to hide in the education wing overnight. Then in the morning they will claim Marcus had a medical emergency here. And there is a nurse Frank trusts, a woman named Sarah Chen who has helped him before. That night, Marcus and Frank talk extensively, sharing details of their cases, and the patterns match perfectly. Same officers, same methods, same prosecutor Davenport, same Judge Caldwell. Frank has been documenting everything for 8 years, keeping detailed records hidden throughout the prison, documenting over 50 cases that fit the pattern. The scope is staggering. Hundreds of innocent black men imprisoned over the years, lives destroyed, families torn apart, communities terrorized, all for money and power and racist hatred, enabled by a system that protects corrupt authority. Frank's research is meticulous, with names and dates and methods all recorded, and Marcus realizes Frank is the evidence they need, living proof of the pattern spanning nearly a decade. Early morning comes and Nurse Sarah Chen arrives as planned, treating Marcus' wounds properly with real medical supplies, cleaning and stitching and bandaging. Sarah's involvement is personal. Her brother was framed by these same officers 5 years ago, wrongfully convicted and sent to prison where he killed himself within a year. Unable to endure the injustice and hopelessness, Sarah has access to an outside phone line, something most people in the prison do not have, and she promises to call Agent Torres, to use Marcus' badge number and code words to prove legitimacy, to keep calling until someone listens and responds. But guards arrive looking for Marcus, blaming him for the yard riot, and Sarah covers for him, saying Marcus was in the education wing when the riot started, that she was treating him for a pre-existing medical condition. The guards are skeptical but cannot prove otherwise, and they take Marcus to solitary confinement anyway, deciding that isolation is appropriate punishment. Solitary confinement is a tiny cell with no windows, a solid metal door with only a small slot for food, sensory deprivation designed to break the human spirit. Marcus is alone in darkness for 23 hours a day, with only 1 hour out of the cell. Days pass. 3, then 4, then Marcus loses track of time in the unchanging darkness. Isolation is psychological torture. No human contact, no natural light. The mind beginning to play tricks. Hallucinations at the edges of vision. Voices come through the walls sometimes. Other inmates in solitary confinement, some of whom have been there for years, their sanity eroded by endless isolation. Marcus holds on to his FBI training, using mental resilience techniques, reciting procedures and regulations in his mind, anything to maintain his grip on reality. On the 7th day, the food slot opens and a tray slides in, but underneath it is a small folded note. The note is from Sarah Chen. Just a few words, Torres contacted. Help coming, hold on, with her initials. Marcus' relief is intense, knowing the FBI finally knows where he is. That extraction must be planned, that rescue is coming. But that night everything changes. A riot breaks out in the solitary wing, fire alarms ringing, smoke filling the corridor. Guards evacuate the wing in the chaos, releasing inmates from cells temporarily. And in the confusion, Marcus sees something that makes his heart stop. Warden Holloway is in the solitary wing, accompanied by Officer Derek Holloway, in uniform, and they should not be here. Derek especially has no jurisdiction inside a state prison. Marcus realizes the riot is cover, that they are here for him specifically, to eliminate him before the FBI can extract him. Derek Holloway holds a fire axe, moving deliberately toward Marcus' cell, and the guards are standing back, complicit in what is about to happen. Derek breaks the lock on Marcus' cell door with the axe, metal shrieking, and enters with the weapon raised. Marcus is unarmed, weak from a week of isolation, injured from the earlier attack, facing a man with a deadly weapon and murder in his eyes. Derek's words are final and chilling, saying, "Should have stayed quiet. Agent Bennett, now you die. Tragic prison riot casualty. No one will ever know the truth." As Derek swings the axe toward Marcus' head, The cell door explodes inward with tremendous force. Flashbang grenades detonate with blinding light and deafening sound, and an FBI raid team storms the corridor in tactical gear. Agent Linda Torres appears in the doorway with her weapon drawn, shouting, "FBI, drop the weapon. Derek Holloway, you are under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy." Marcus collapses to the floor, sees Torres' face through the smoke and confusion, and blacks out as FBI agents flood the corridor and take control of the prison. Marcus wakes in a hospital bed with clean white sheets and the smell of antiseptic replacing the stench of prison, an IV in his arm providing fluids and antibiotics, bright lights overhead that hurt his eyes. Disorientation is immediate, not knowing how much time has passed, whether he is still in danger, if his family is safe. Agent Linda Torres sits in a chair beside his bed, relief visible on her face mixed with exhaustion that speaks of days without sleep. Torres explains that the FBI raided Westfield Correctional Facility 48 hours ago, a massive operation involving over 100 agents plus U.S. Marshals and state police. Arrests were made immediately. Derek Holloway caught with the axe in his hand. Warden Holloway arrested for conspiracy and attempted murder. 7 prison guards taken into custody for their roles in the scheme. And Big Mike, along with the Street King's leadership, charged with attempted murder and racketeering. Marcus' medical condition required surgery. His stab wounds had become infected. He was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but doctors say he will make a full recovery within a few weeks. Marcus' first questions are about his family, desperate to know if his mother and sister are safe, and Torres assures him they are in protective custody, guarded by federal agents, completely secure. Marcus asks about Frank Morrison, and Torres smiles, saying Frank was extracted during the raid and is recovering in another hospital, finally free after 8 years of wrongful imprisonment. Marcus' urgency builds as he thinks about the others involved in the conspiracy, insisting they need to arrest Mitchell and Ramsey and Judge Caldwell and Prosecutor Davenport before they can flee or destroy evidence. Torres' response surprises him, saying they already did. Everyone was arrested during the raid, simultaneous operations across the city. All the conspirators are now in federal custody. Marcus is shocked at how quickly everything moved, and Torres explains that once Sarah Chen made contact and provided Marcus' badge number and code words, the FBI activated emergency protocols, knowing they could not risk Marcus being killed. The evidence supporting the case is substantial. Frank Morrison's 8 years of documentation, combined with Marcus' 6 months of undercover work, plus Sarah Chen's recorded conversations with corrupt guards, testimony from dozens of victims. The federal charges are serious. Civil rights violations under color of law, conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights, false imprisonment, attempted murder, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. Torres expresses concern that, while the case is strong, proving everything in court will be challenging, needing evidence that is absolutely airtight to overcome the natural reluctance to believe that police and judges could be so corrupt. Marcus insists he wants to be there for every step, to see them face justice, saying he has earned that right through what he endured. Torres agrees immediately, promising Marcus will be fully involved in building the prosecution. The next day, Marcus is discharged from the hospital and taken directly to the FBI field office. Security is extremely high because threats have been made against Marcus and everyone involved in exposing the conspiracy. The briefing room is impressive, with a large conference table and walls covered with evidence boards, photographs connected by red string, timelines and financial records and witness statements. The team working the case includes 15 agents, several analysts, and prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lead prosecutor is Assistant U.S. Attorney James Chen, a determined man in his mid-40s with a reputation for taking on difficult corruption cases. Chen provides an overview, explaining they are charging 23 individuals with various federal crimes, a RICO case that will tie everyone together in a single conspiracy. The defendants include all 3 officers, Holloway, Mitchell, and Ramsey, Judge Patricia Caldwell, Prosecutor Richard Davenport, Warden Richard Holloway, 7 prison guards, Public Defender Timothy Wells, who threw Marcus' case. Additional defendants include Police Captain Thomas Reed, who approved false arrest reports and provided cover, records clerk Monica Stevens, who falsified database entries to create fake criminal histories, and evidence technician Patrick O'Brien, who planted evidence and manipulated forensics. The web of corruption extends further than Marcus ever suspected, reaching into every level of law enforcement and the judiciary. Marcus studies the evidence boards carefully, seeing photographs of all the conspirators, timelines showing years of coordinated criminal activity, connections drawn between individuals that reveal the scope of their organization. Chen presents the challenge they face, saying they have found something bigger, something that initially did not make sense. Forensic accountants trace the money trail, following payments made to the corrupt officers, discovering shell corporations and offshore accounts funneling money in regular large payments. But the source of the money was unexpected. Not drug money they were stealing from evidence, but payments from a legitimate corporation. Agent Torres pulls up financial records on a large screen, showing a corporate name that means nothing to Marcus initially: Prescott Pharmaceutical Industries. Marcus' confusion is genuine, asking why a pharmaceutical company would be paying corrupt police officers. What connection could possibly exist between legitimate business and street-level corruption? Analyst Rebecca Foster, a young woman who specializes in financial crimes, presents her discoveries, showing that Prescott Pharma has been making regular payments to Holloway and his team for 5 years, totaling over $2 million. Investigation into the company revealed recent scandals, FDA investigations into illegal distribution practices, lawsuits alleging they flooded communities with addictive opioids, allegations of criminal distribution networks. Foster presents her theory that the planted drugs in Marcus' case and dozens of others were not random, examining evidence that was supposed to have been destroyed, finding that the cocaine and pills had specific chemical markers matching Prescott's manufacturing processes. The scheme becomes clear as they explain it. Prescott Pharmaceutical was illegally distributing their drugs outside legal channels, making enormous profits from addiction. But to hide their corporate criminal enterprise, they used corrupt police to plant evidence on innocent people. Every false arrest shifted attention away from Prescott's actual distribution network, made it appear that drugs in the community came from street-level dealers rather than corporate criminals. The victims were chosen deliberately: young black men from low-income areas, people the system routinely disbelieved, people whose accusations of being framed would be dismissed as typical criminal excuses. Marcus' rage is volcanic, realizing they destroyed lives, stole years, tore apart families, not for some understandable, if inexcusable, motive, but simply to cover corporate crimes and protect profit margins. Torres confirms that 53 people have been identified so far, all framed, all serving prison sentences, all completely innocent. The injustice is staggering. Years stolen that can never be returned. Children who grew up without fathers. Mothers who died while their sons were imprisoned for crimes they did not commit. Chen's determination is absolute, saying they are charging Prescott executives too. CEO David Prescott, COO Linda Hamilton, legal counsel Robert Zhang, bringing down the entire organization. Federal agents are at Prescott headquarters at this moment, executing search warrants, seizing computers and files, freezing bank accounts. But Torres pulls up another document showing the conspiracy reaches even higher. Mayor Anthony Richardson received substantial campaign donations from Prescott Pharmaceutical, and his involvement includes appointing Judge Caldwell to the bench and promoting Captain Reed through the ranks, actively protecting the operation in exchange for political funding. Police Chief Warren Davis also received money from Prescott, looked the other way when complaints were made about Holloway and his team, actively suppressed internal affairs investigations. State Senator Michael Brooks lobbied against police reform legislation, took hundreds of thousands from Prescott, helped kill bills that would have created oversight and accountability. The conspiracy reaches the highest levels of city and state government, a network of corruption that seemed impenetrable. Marcus feels overwhelmed, asking how they can possibly take down all of them. So many powerful people with resources to fight back. Chen's confidence is reassuring, saying they will do it one step at a time, starting with the officers who committed the actual crimes, working their way up the chain to the executives and politicians. Torres adds that they have Marcus and Frank Morrison and Sarah Chen as eyewitnesses who lived through the conspiracy, whose testimony will be powerful and credible. Video evidence from the prison shows Derek Holloway attempting to murder Marcus with an axe, impossible to explain away. Audio recordings Sarah Chen made of conversations with corrupt guards provide direct evidence of the conspiracy. Frank Morrison's 8 years of detailed documentation shows the pattern spanning nearly a decade, proving systematic rather than isolated crimes. The case is strong, though it will take months to prosecute fully. Multiple trials for different defendants, requiring patience and determination. Marcus asks about the other victims, the 53 people currently in prison, innocent men serving sentences for crimes they did not commit. Chen promises that the Conviction Integrity Unit is reviewing every case, preparing motions to vacate convictions, working to get them released as quickly as possible. Emergency hearings are scheduled to begin tomorrow. A federal judge will hear motions and review evidence, and they will prioritize cases where inmates face the longest sentences or are in immediate danger. Marcus suggests they start with Dwayne Jackson and his brother, both imprisoned by Holloway's lies, both suffering for years because of this conspiracy. Torres agrees they will be prioritized. The evening briefing concludes with everyone exhausted but energized by the scope of what they are attempting. Marcus makes a request that surprises Torres, saying he wants to go back to the courthouse, the same courthouse where he was convicted, where this nightmare began. Torres asks why, what purpose that would serve, and Marcus' determination is clear in his voice, saying tomorrow Judge Caldwell has a bail hearing before a federal judge, and he wants to be there when federal marshals arrest her, wants to see her face when she realizes her power is gone. Torres receives an urgent phone call during their conversation, and her face goes pale as she listens. She hangs up and delivers devastating news. Judge Caldwell did not show up for her federal arraignment. Neither did Prosecutor Davenport. They have both disappeared. Worse, 12 hours ago, a private jet registered to Prescott Pharmaceutical departed from a private airfield heading to Brazil, and investigators believe the top executives, including CEO David Prescott, are attempting to flee the country. Marcus realizes the most powerful conspirators are running, might escape justice entirely, that everything they have worked for could collapse if these people reach countries without extradition treaties. FBI mobilization is immediate, with the Emergency Operations Center activated, a manhunt beginning for the fugitives who are attempting to escape American justice. International cooperation is essential. Contacts made with Interpol, Brazilian authorities contacted, Border Patrol agencies alerted, airports monitored. The private jet in question is tail number November 7299. Papa, a Gulfstream G650 registered to Prescott Pharmaceutical. Filed flight plan showing destination as Sao Paulo, Brazil. But the jet never landed in Sao Paulo, disappearing from radar somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico. And there is brief terror that it crashed, but no wreckage is found, no distress signals received. Torres realizes the flight plan was false, a deception to throw off pursuit, and the jet actually changed course mid-flight. Air traffic analysis reveals the jet turned west instead of south, heading toward Mexico rather than Brazil, landing at a small private airport outside Monterrey with limited oversight and likely corrupt officials. FBI jurisdiction ends at the American border, requiring cooperation from Mexican authorities who are contacted but slow to respond, possibly dealing with their own corruption issues. Marcus' frustration is intense, saying they cannot let the conspirators escape after everything, after the lives destroyed, after the years stolen from innocent people. Torres makes a decision, calling the FBI attaché stationed in Mexico City, an agent named Carlos Mendoza, who agrees to investigate but needs 6 hours to travel to Monterrey. 6 hours is too long. The fugitives could disappear into Mexico's interior or flee to another country, could be gone forever. Marcus requests permission to go himself. Unofficial reconnaissance. Not a formal operation, but just gathering intelligence. Torres hesitates because this is against protocol, could cause an international incident if American federal agents operate on Mexican soil without proper authorization, But Torres knows Marcus is right. They need eyes on the situation immediately. And she arranges an unofficial mission, calling in favors, getting Marcus on a charter flight to Monterey. 2 agents accompany him. Agent Ray Foster and Agent Michelle Park, both former military with combat experience. The 3-hour flight gives Marcus time to brief them on the targets, showing photographs, discussing the plan, which is simply to locate and surveil until Mexican authorities or official FBI can take custody. They arrive in Monterey as evening approaches, the airport dusty and hot, renting an SUV and driving to the suspected private airfield based on air traffic information. The airfield is remote, surrounded by desert terrain, with sparse vegetation, consisting of a single runway, 1 hangar, and a few small buildings. Surveillance begins with Agent Park positioning herself with a long-range camera and telephoto lens, Foster monitoring radio communications with specialized equipment, Marcus watching through binoculars from a concealed position. The Prescott jet sits on the tarmac, clearly visible, and there is activity as people load boxes onto a smaller plane, a twin-engine Cessna that suggests they are switching aircraft. Marcus recognizes Judge Patricia Caldwell and Prosecutor Richard Davenport, moving urgently, loading belongings and documents, clearly preparing to flee again. The Prescott executives are there too. CEO David Prescott is an older man with white hair, moving with the arrogance of someone accustomed to power. 3 other executives working with him. They are transferring everything to the smaller plane, probably planning to fly somewhere even harder to track a secondary escape route. Foster intercepts radio chatter and learns the Cessna is being fueled for a flight to Venezuela, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. Perfect refuge for fugitives with money. Time is critical because they will take off within the hour, and once they reach Venezuelan airspace, they are beyond reach. Marcus contacts Torres asking for authorization to intervene, to stop them before they escape. But Torres faces her own constraints. Mexican authorities still have not arrived on scene. Legal options are extremely limited. International law prevents American agents from making arrests on foreign soil. Marcus argues desperately that if the conspirators reach Venezuela, they are lost forever. All of them. And years of investigation will end with the most guilty escaping justice. Torres makes the hardest decision of her career, telling Marcus to do what he needs to do, that she will handle the political and legal consequences later. A plan is formed quickly. Marcus and his team will approach the airfield, attempt to detain the fugitives through citizen's arrest, since they are private citizens on Mexican soil witnessing crimes. All 3 agents are armed with their service weapons, Foster and Park with Glock pistols, Marcus borrowing a weapon from Foster's backup collection. They approach at dusk using the desert terrain for cover, mesquite and rocks, providing concealment as they move toward the hangar. At 50 yards out, Marcus spots additional security, armed guards positioned around the plane, private security probably hired by Prescott, former military contractors heavily armed. Reassessment is necessary because 3 FBI agents against 6 professional security guards, plus the fugitives, changes the tactical situation significantly. Park suggests waiting for Mexican federal police, who must arrive eventually. But Marcus refuses, knowing the police could be bought off, could be working for Prescott, could arrest the FBI agents instead. Foster proposes a distraction plan. He will approach from the east side, claiming to be a lost American tourist, drawing security attention, while Marcus circles from the west. The plan is risky, but they are out of options, and Park stays back with a rifle to provide overwatch and precision fire if necessary. Foster's distraction works initially. He approaches the perimeter fence looking confused and harmless, and security guards move to intercept him with aggressive body language. Marcus uses this diversion to slip inside the hangar from the west side, moving through darkness, navigating around stacks of crates and scattered documents. Voices come from ahead, and Marcus recognizes Judge Caldwell and Prosecutor Davenport, arguing with David Prescott, their conversation revealing tension and fear. Marcus hides behind crates, listening carefully to gather intelligence. Caldwell is angry, saying, "You promised this was foolproof? You said we would be protected? Nothing could go wrong." Prescott's response is cold and certain, saying, "We are protected, Once we are in Caracas, no one can touch us. Venezuela does not extradite to the United States. Davenport expresses worry about the witnesses, asking what about Morrison and Chen? They know everything. They can testify to all of it. Prescott's reply makes Marcus' blood run cold, saying, "Already handled. My people picked them up an hour ago. They are being held until we are safely away." Marcus' shock and horror are immediate. Realizing Frank Morrison and Sarah Chen are hostages, that the conspiracy has reached even into FBI protective custody, Prescott continues explaining, saying they are in the other hangar right now. Once we take off, my men have orders to eliminate them. Make it look like cartel violence, 2 more bodies in Mexico that no one will investigate. Judge Caldwell hesitates, expressing discomfort with murder, saying this has gone too far. We are officers of the court. Prescott's response reveals his true nature, saying, "You are accessories to 53 false imprisonments. Ruined lives, years stolen. 2 more deaths are nothing compared to what you have already done. You are in too deep to develop a conscience now." Marcus' rage barely stays contained, wanting to attack immediately but knowing he must find Frank and Sarah first, must rescue them before confronting the fugitives. He backs out of the hangar quietly, signaling Agent Park with hand gestures indicating a second location, and Park confirms through her rifle scope that there are 2 guards at a second smaller hangar, about 100 yards away, with movement inside. Marcus and Foster regroup, moving toward the second hangar, approaching from blind angles, taking down both guards silently with coordinated strikes, using cable ties and gags to secure them. Inside the second hangar, which serves as a vehicle maintenance bay, they find Frank Morrison and Sarah Chen tied to chairs with duct tape over their mouths, terrified and exhausted. Marcus frees them quickly, cutting their bonds with a knife, removing the tape gently. Frank's relief is profound, saying, "Marcus, thank God. They grabbed us from the FBI safe house. Someone on the inside betrayed our location. Protection failed completely." Sarah is crying, saying they were going to kill us. The guards made that clear, talking about it openly, as though our lives meant nothing. Marcus promises they are safe now, tells them to stay in this hangar with Foster, who will protect them while calling for backup. Marcus moves alone back toward the main hangar, knowing he has to stop the fugitives from boarding the Cessna and escaping. The plane's engines are starting, the high-pitched whine of turbines spinning up. They are preparing for immediate takeoff. Marcus runs across the open tarmac, fully exposed, and security spots him immediately. Shots are fired, bullets impacting the concrete around Marcus' feet. He dives behind a fuel truck taking cover. He returns fire, his training taking over. Controlled bursts, taking down 1 guard who falls clutching his leg. The other guards pin Marcus behind the truck, bullets punching holes in the metal structure. Judge Caldwell and the executives run toward the Cessna's stairs, desperate to board and escape. David Prescott reaches the plane first, climbing the stairs to the cabin. Marcus' pursuit is desperate, sprinting toward the plane when there is a brief lull in gunfire. But 3 security guards position themselves between him and the aircraft. A firefight erupts with Marcus outnumbered, taking cover behind the plane's landing gear, bullets ricocheting off metal. Agent Park's intervention comes from her distant position, rifle shots precise and measured, taking down 2 guards with clean shots to non-lethal areas, disabling them. The last guard sees his companions fall and surrenders, dropping his weapon, raising his hands. Marcus boards the plane, weapon drawn, climbing the stairs to find the cabin occupied by Judge Caldwell, Prosecutor Davenport, David Prescott, and 3 other Prescott executives, plus the pilot in the cockpit. Marcus' command is clear and authoritative. "Nobody move. FBI, you are all under arrest." Prescott's sneer shows complete contempt, saying, "You have no jurisdiction here. This is Mexico. You cannot arrest anyone. You are just a criminal with a gun." Marcus' response acknowledges the truth, saying, "I am not making an arrest under American law. I am preventing a murder conspiracy. I am protecting witnesses. You just admitted planning to kill Frank Morrison and Sarah Chen." Judge Caldwell begins pleading, her arrogance gone, replaced by desperation, saying, "Marcus, please, we can make a deal. I can give you everyone. I can testify against all of them." Marcus' refusal is absolute, saying, "You had your chance for deals. In a courtroom, under oath, where you denied me justice, denied me the presumption of innocence, rushed my sentencing to bury me." Sirens finally approach, Mexican federal police arriving at last, and David Prescott reaches for something inside his jacket. Marcus fires a warning shot into the ceiling, the sound deafening in the enclosed cabin, and everyone freezes with hands visible. Prescott smiles, despite his situation, saying, "You think this ends with us? You think catching this group means anything? This network spans 12 states, over 300 officers, 50 judges. You have caught one branch, but the tree still stands. Even if we go down, the conspiracy continues." Prescott continues with chilling certainty, saying, "They know your name now, Marcus Bennett. They know your family, your mother Diane, your sister Keisha. This will never be over for you. You have painted a target on everyone you love." Mexican federal police enter the plane with weapons drawn, making arrests in Spanish, and Marcus stands frozen, understanding that exposing this conspiracy might have just ensured he and his family will be targets for the rest of their lives. Time jump forward 1 year to a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. The trial of United States versus Prescott and others has become a national sensation. News vans filling the streets, protesters outside holding signs demanding justice and police accountability. Inside the massive courtroom, over 200 spectators pack every available seat. The gallery filled with victims, families, journalists, and citizens who understand the historical importance of this moment. The defendants sit together at a long table, 23 individuals in orange prison jumpsuits with their hands shackled, no longer the powerful figures who terrorized a community but exposed as common criminals. Officers Holloway, Mitchell, and Ramsey sit together looking diminished. Judge Caldwell appears aged and broken. Prosecutor Davenport stares at the table, avoiding all eye contact. Public Defender Wells looks ashamed. Warden Holloway maintains stubborn defiance, and the Prescott executives, including CEO David Prescott, still carry arrogance despite their circumstances. Marcus sits in the gallery wearing a suit with his FBI credentials visible on his belt, flanked by his mother Diane, who has aged from this ordeal but remains proud, and his sister Keisha, who holds his hand for support. Frank Morrison is present, a free man after 8 long years, testifying earlier as a key witness, his voice strong despite the trauma he endured. Sarah Chen sits nearby, brave and determined to see justice served for her brother's memory. 53 exonerated men fill the courtroom, their presence powerful testimony to the scope of the injustice, including Dwayne Jackson, freed after 8 years. His brother beside him also freed, and Terrell Williams finally released and reunited with his daughter. Judge Martha Rodriguez presides, a federal judge with a reputation for fairness and intolerance for corruption, her presence reassuring to everyone seeking justice. The prosecution team, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney James Chen, has spent 6 months presenting evidence methodically, building an ironclad case through documents, recordings, testimony, and financial records. Today brings closing arguments, the final opportunity for both sides to make their case before jury deliberation. Chen's closing argument is powerful and emotional, pacing before the jury box with controlled passion, laying out the conspiracy's mechanics with devastating clarity. He shows the jury a paper trail of payments, shell corporations, offshore accounts, $2 million flowing from Prescott Pharmaceutical to corrupt police officers. He presents testimony from dozens of victims, men who lost years of their lives, children who grew up without fathers, mothers who died while their innocent sons were imprisoned. Chen details the scheme where Prescott illegally distributed pharmaceutical-grade opioids and cocaine, then used corrupt officers to plant evidence on innocent people to cover their corporate crimes. The numbers are staggering. Over $15 million in illegal profits, while 53 innocent people were imprisoned for a combined total of 260 years stolen from their lives. Chen's emphasis makes the racial component explicit, saying this was not just corruption but systematic racist violence. Victims chosen deliberately because they were young black men from poor neighborhoods, people the system routinely disbelieves and discards. He points at the defendants one by one, naming their crimes, saying they weaponized America's racist history for profit, exploiting prejudice and fear to destroy innocent lives. Chen shows Marcus' case as the perfect example. An FBI agent targeted and nearly killed because he got close to exposing them. His credentials dismissed, his identity denied, the system refusing to believe him because of the color of his skin and the lies of white authority figures. Chen references Frank Morrison, saying they did the same thing 8 years ago to another FBI agent, destroyed his career, stole 8 years of his life, and the FBI itself failed to protect him because the conspiracy was so deep. He presents Sarah Chen's courage in recording conversations that exposed the prison conspiracy, honoring her brother's memory by ensuring justice. The jury's attention is complete, several members openly crying, all of them engaged and focused. Defense attorneys present their closings with increasingly desperate strategies, 11 different lawyers each trying to minimize their client's role. Some blame rogue officers acting independently, claiming executives had no knowledge of illegal activities. Others argue they were following orders, trapped in a corrupt system. Individual guilt minimal compared to systemic failure. Prescott's lawyer argues the company itself is a victim of rogue employees, that corporate leadership had no knowledge of the conspiracy, despite overwhelming evidence of payments and emails and memos directly implicating them. The defense arguments are weak and contradictory, transparently false in the face of documented evidence, and several defense attorneys seem to be going through the motions without real hope of acquittal. Judge Rodriguez instructs the jury with clear explanations of the law, defining conspiracy, explaining standards of proof, being scrupulously fair in her presentation while also making clear the seriousness of civil rights violations under color of law. The jury is sent to deliberate, and Marcus waits at FBI headquarters, unable to sit still, pacing the conference room, knowing everything depends on this verdict. Agent Torres remains his handler, though their relationship has changed, strained by later revelations but still rooted in mutual respect. Torres feels responsibility for not extracting Marcus sooner, for the suffering he endured, and Marcus has largely forgiven her, understanding the impossible choices she faced. 3 days pass with the jury deliberating, considering hundreds of charges against 23 defendants, and finally word comes that a verdict has been reached. The courthouse reconvenes with everyone returning, tension so thick it feels physical, victims holding hands, families praying, Marcus barely breathing as the jury files back into the courtroom. Judge Rodriguez asks formally if the jury has reached verdicts, and the forewoman stands, a middle-aged black woman who has taken her responsibility seriously, answering, "Yes, Your Honor, we have reached verdicts on all counts." Count by count, the forewoman reads, "Guilty, guilty, guilty." The word repeated like a drumbeat of justice. 23 defendants, hundreds of charges, every single one resulting in conviction. The courtroom erupts in emotion, people cheering and crying and embracing. Years of pain and injustice, finally acknowledged by the system. Victims hug each other, tears flowing freely. Families celebrating this moment they feared would never come. Marcus' tears are the first he has allowed since his arrest, letting emotion pour out. His mother holding him tightly saying, "You did it, baby. You got justice for all of them." The defendants' reactions vary. Holloway remains stone-faced in denial. Mitchell cries openly. Ramsey looks angry. Judge Caldwell has collapsed in her chair. Prosecutor Davenport cannot meet anyone's eyes. David Prescott maintains defiant arrogance even in defeat. Judge Rodriguez bangs her gavel, restoring order, announcing that sentencing will occur 1 month from today, that defendants will remain in federal custody without bail until that time. Outside the courthouse, a press conference is held, with Marcus standing alongside other victims, telling their collective story to assembled journalists and cameras broadcasting nationally. Media questions come rapidly. How does it feel? What happens next? Are you angry about what was done to you? Marcus' statement is carefully considered, saying, "I am grateful that justice was served today. Grateful for every person who fought to expose this conspiracy. But this is not over. We have exposed one network, but there are others. David Prescott told me they operate in 12 states with hundreds of officers. We have to keep fighting to root out this corruption wherever it exists." Commitment is made publicly. Marcus dedicates his career to finding similar conspiracies, to protecting communities from racist police violence disguised as law enforcement. The FBI announces formation of a special task force with Marcus leading it, investigating patterns of false arrests and planted evidence nationwide, prioritizing cases where racial discrimination appears systematic. 1 month later, sentencing day arrives and Judge Rodriguez hands down maximum sentences without mercy. Officer Holloway receives 35 years, Mitchell 30 years, Ramsey 40 years, because he was the ringleader. Judge Patricia Caldwell is sentenced to 25 years and disbarred permanently from practicing law. Prosecutor Richard Davenport receives 20 years and is also disbarred. His license to practice law revoked. The Prescott executives receive the harshest sentences. CEO David Prescott gets 50 years, effectively a life sentence. Other executives receiving between 20 and 40 years each. Warden Richard Holloway receives 30 years in federal prison, where he will experience the same system he corrupted. Total sentences exceed 500 years combined. And while this cannot return stolen time to victims, it provides acknowledgement that their suffering was real and undeserved. Compensation is ordered through civil suits pending, millions of dollars in damages to be paid by Prescott pharmaceutical and individual defendants, though no amount of money can truly compensate for years stolen. That evening, Marcus meets privately with Agent Linda Torres at FBI headquarters for a conversation that has been delayed too long. Torres congratulates him on excellent work, saying she is proud of everything he accomplished. The conspiracy exposed, justice served, lives saved. Marcus has a question that has haunted him for months, needing to ask for the truth. He reveals that he has been reading old case files, discovering that the FBI started investigating Holloway's unit 3 years before they sent Marcus undercover. 3 years during which the conspiracy continued operating. Torres becomes tense, knowing what Marcus has uncovered. Marcus continues, saying, "Frank Morrison was your agent too. You were his handler 8 years ago when he was framed and imprisoned." Torres admits quietly, "Yes, that is true." Marcus' realization is devastating, saying, "You knew he was in prison. You knew he was innocent and suffering. You left him there for 8 years. Torres responds that it was complicated, that there were factors Marcus does not understand. Marcus' anger breaks through, asking her to uncomplicate it, to explain how she could leave her own agent in prison for nearly a decade, while dozens more men were framed and imprisoned. Torres' confession is painful, saying they needed ironclad evidence. If they had moved sooner, they would have gotten the officers, but not the network. Not Prescott Pharmaceutical, not the judges and politicians who enabled everything. They needed to build a case that was absolutely unbeatable. She claims Frank understood this, that he chose to stay, that he agreed to sacrifice himself to ensure the entire conspiracy could be destroyed. Marcus' horror grows, asking if Frank really chose, or if Torres convinced him he had no choice, using his dedication against him. Torres admits through tears that she made the hardest decision of her career, sacrificing the few to save the many, allowing some to suffer to prevent thousands of future victims. And Frank agreed because he understood the mathematics of justice. Marcus asks directly if he was a sacrifice too, if Torres was prepared to let him serve years in prison if necessary to build the case. Torres' honesty is brutal, saying they knew he would be arrested, hoped it would not go to trial. But yes, they were prepared to let him serve time, if that was required, to get convictions on everyone involved. Marcus feels betrayed, saying, "You were supposed to protect me. That is what handlers do. That is the fundamental promise between agents and their controllers." Torres attempts justification, saying she was protecting thousands of future victims, that sometimes justice requires sacrifice, that hard choices define what separates those who talk about change from those who actually achieve it. Marcus makes his decision, saying he cannot work with Torres anymore, that he is requesting a transfer to a different handler, that trust once broken cannot be easily repaired. Torres accepts this, saying she understands completely, and admits that for what it is worth she is sorry for the pain he endured. But she would make the same choice again because the results speak for themselves. Marcus leaves FBI headquarters walking into the night air, grappling with moral ambiguity, knowing that justice was served but questioning the methods, wondering where the line exists between necessary sacrifice and unacceptable harm. The final scene shows Marcus visiting Frank Morrison at his apartment, where Frank is rebuilding his life slowly, attending trauma counseling, considering a position teaching at a local college, trying to find purpose after 8 years stolen. Marcus tells Frank about Torres' confession, about learning that Frank's imprisonment was not just abandonment, but calculated strategy. Frank's response surprises Marcus, saying he knows. He knew from the beginning what Torres was asking. Frank explains that she gave him a choice: stay inside and help document the conspiracy, providing evidence that could not be disputed, or get extracted immediately and watch the case collapse with only minor charges against a few officers. He chose to stay. His decision, not hers. Knowing what it would cost, but believing the sacrifice was worth stopping the conspiracy permanently. Marcus expresses respect for Frank's heroism, understanding the courage required to choose suffering for a greater purpose. Frank offers perspective, saying, "We stopped them. 53 men are free. Thousands of future victims were saved. That has to be worth what I endured, what you endured, what Sarah Chen risked." Marcus struggles with the question of where the line exists. At what cost justice becomes too expensive. Frank's wisdom comes from hard experience, saying there is no line that works for every case. Every situation requires judgment. We do our best with impossible choices and live with the consequences. They sit together in silence. Two men who sacrificed everything for justice, bonded by shared trauma and shared purpose. Marcus looks at his FBI badge, questions whether the system he serves is worthy of his sacrifice, wonders if an institution that allowed Frank to suffer for 8 years deserves his loyalty. But he commits to trying to make the system better from within, knowing true justice is imperfect and costly and requires constant vigilance. The closing message acknowledges that while justice was served and the conspiracy was exposed and the victims were freed, the cost was enormous. The moral compromises were painful, and the knowledge that similar conspiracies exist elsewhere casts a shadow over the victory. Marcus achieved his goal but learned that righteousness is complicated, that institutions can simultaneously save and oppress, that the fight for racial justice never truly ends. He emerges transformed, committed but wary, hopeful but realistic, understanding that every victory in the struggle for equality requires sacrifice, and that burden falls disproportionately on those already marginalized. The conspiracy reached higher than anyone imagined, and while this battle was won, the war continues in courtrooms and streets and communities across America. So now I want to ask you something that matters. What would you do if you were in Marcus' position? If you had to choose between revealing your identity early and potentially letting guilty people escape, or enduring false imprisonment to build an unbeatable case, how much sacrifice is too much in pursuit of justice? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is important and your voice matters. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice and sacrifice and the systems we trust to protect us, please hit that like button to help others find this story. Subscribe to this channel because we will keep telling stories that matter, stories that expose truth and demand accountability. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who cares about justice, someone who understands that change requires people willing to stand up even when the cost is high. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about these issues. And thank you for being part of a community that believes everyone deserves justice regardless of the color of their skin. Remember that every system is only as good as the people willing to hold it accountable, and that includes all of us. Stay vigilant, stay hopeful, and never stop fighting for what is right. Until next time, may justice prevail and truth emerge from darkness.